Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Dissenter. I'm your host, as always, Ricardo Lopes, and today I'm joined by Laura Carroll. She's a nonfiction author, expert on the child-free choice and pronatalism, and an advocate for reproductive rights and ethics related to reproduction as well. She's the author of The Baby Matrix, Why Freeing Our Minds from Outmoded Thinking About Parenthood and Reproduction Will Create a Better World. And today we're talking mostly about child-free choices and pronatalism. So Laura, welcome to the show. It's a huge pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so let's start with a basic question here. So what is it to be child-free? What does it mean?
Well, that word was termed in a textbook going as far back into the 70s. And really, it still means what it meant then, is it's a person who does not want to parent, they don't want to have children, it's the desire not to have children. So, and it is the word child-free with no hyphen, no child space free. Online, you see all kinds of things now where, and it's a muddled definition of different versions of the word depending on the article that you read. But that's the way I term it and how I use it. And that's, historically, that's how it's been used and spelled.
Would it be any problem at all if it had an hyphen?
Well, if it has a hyphen, sometimes it does mean the same. It's synonymous. But in other pieces and other articles I read, it could mean that it's a person who just doesn't have children right now. It could mean whatever the article's about. So it gets confusing. So, and you also see it with a space in between, which can also mean parents who currently aren't with their kids. So I just like to say, put it all together. And that's the word that consistently means it's people who really choose not to have children.
Okay, so let's address right away one question that probably people who will not be very fond of this conversation will want to ask. So does it have anything to do with being anti-children?
No, it really doesn't. I think that, it can, where there are, I would maybe recharacterize it a little. There are some child-free people who would say that, children in general are not their favorite thing. Now, not that they hate them, but, it's not their favorite thing and they don't want to raise them. So it's not that they're anti-children. Some of them have jobs that involve children, so there's a small percentage who would say that they dislike them, but that's certainly not the majority. And I think this anti-children messaging we hear a lot more of late has to do more with anti-natalists and anti-natalism, which is a whole other philosophy where you could be, it's more of a philosophy that is of people who believe it's not, they don't like to see children come into the world, babies to come into the world because of the suffering that they will incur, and they didn't choose that. So someone who holds that philosophy could be someone who is child-free, but not necessarily. Let me tell you, there's a lot of child-free people who don't even know what that word means, let alone the philosophy. So I would say that no. Does it have anything to do with being anti-children? Generally speaking, absolutely not.
And let me just add, because I've spoken with antinatalists on the show, antinatalism also does not have anything necessarily to do with being anti-children. It's just that
not necessarily, no.
Yeah, because there are many antinatalists that say that we should take care of children who are already born.
Who are already here, exactly, right. Yes, it's just that the word anti-children, just because we don't want to raise them doesn't mean we're anti them or that we hate them. It's just that we don't want to raise them. So that's a distinction.
Yeah. So is a child-free choice something that people try to impose on others?
In my 25-year plus experience, I've not seen that. There's no, they don't try to impose it on others. They don't necessarily advocate it either. I think what I've seen more in just the 2 generations, the digital revolution that I've witnessed since the year 2000, that online has allowed more people to become educated about the choice, more people to be aware of it, and the people who make the choice. In one of my first books, Families of Two, which was interviews with happily married couples who were child-free, before Google and all this time, they were people who felt like they lived in the tributaries, really of society. And fast forward 25 years, there's so much now online to learn and to be aware of and to see these people. They're just like, you and me, they're very normal people. So it's not so much about advocacy or pushing it on others. It's more just to say, here we are, and we're just like you. We're normal people, and we've just made a choice that's different than others.
So let me ask you, because sometimes, I've heard these personally, but also sometimes I hear and read people on the internet, people who are child-free complaining about having to hear some unpleasant things, to say the least, from people who have children in regards to their choice to not have children. Where do you think that this comes from, and why do you think that there are many people out there that if they learn that someone is child-free, that they feel the need to moralize them so much?
Well, I think I go into the baby matrix, because it's foundationally speaking, it boils down to pronatalism, and they're holding some pronatalist beliefs that makes it easy to judge that choice. For example, very common one is that people might see others who are child-free, that they're selfish because they don't want to raise kids. They don't want to have parenthood be the central focus of their life. So somehow that makes them a selfish person. And other things, there's something wrong with people who don't want to have kids. So, but because they hold the belief that normal people want them, and, to do the most selfless thing to do is to have a child, those beliefs, when they see people doing the opposite, it's easy to judge them. But the foundational element of it is pronatalism, which I'm sure we'll talk more about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's address another elephant in the room, because this is something that I also hear a lot from pronatalist people. They say that most people without children, child-free people, are childless, not exactly by choice, but by circumstance. And then they get into some pseudo-critiques of feminism, like saying that, it is because, for example, this is just one thing that they say others as well. It is, for example, because women want to have a career and they want to study, they want to go to higher education, and then they postpone having children, and then they arrive at their 40s or late 30s. And then they say, oh my God, I can no longer have children. I'm no longer in a proper state to have children or something like that. But they regret the choice. That's what they mean by that. That they in fact wanted to have children, but they regret not having children. And they are just childless by circumstance. Do we have good data on that? And if so, what does the data tell us?
We really don't have good data on that specifically. Now, while that could be a woman's story, it's very logical, it's feasible, but it's very, in my opinion, most people who end up without children, it's very hard to generalize. And so for most women, it's a story that evolves over time. Now, for some, it could be that they end up when early in their lives, they think they want them, they have a career, their life goes on, and many end up realizing they don't want them. They end up making a child-free choice. So over time, their feelings shift, or it could be the opposite, or it could be some mix of it in between when they're in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. So every woman has their own story. And I looked into that when I did a longitudinal study with 25 women who they were in their 20s when we started, and they were decidedly child-free. And I watched them for 10 years, and I interviewed them once a year for 10 years and watched how their lives unfolded, how their feelings about their child-free choice remained the same, or sometimes they had shifts in sureness about that. And then at the end of the 10 years, the story ends with, well, did they still have kids? Did they not? And there was a variety of stories. So I think it's really hard to just say this is the one thing that happens and that women, you know, they regret it. That can happen, but there's a whole host of other stories how women navigate their reproductive choice and whether they have children of their own, they adopt or not.
Right. I mean, but we shouldn't assume,
No,
unless there's good data to support that,
absolutely.
that people who are child-free are just childless by circumstance and that they regret that decision. Correct.
See, to me, definitively, if you're child-free, you don't feel regret. So if you're childless by circumstance, that might, that more indicates that, yes, gee, I really wanted them, but for reasons, I don't have them. A child-free person would say, I'm in my 40s, 50s, and I can no longer have kids. Whoopee, I'm happy about that. I don't want them. And like I say, many women's journeys, they begin thinking they want them, but over time they realize for a whole host of reasons that they feel their life is going to be more fulfilling without that parental role. That's a lot of what I see when it's delayed. So now there is research to support the fact that women who know early in life that they don't want to have kids, and they're very sure about that from a younger age, they tend not to change their mind ever. Okay, they don't get into that regret space or the evolution of the choice over time. It's less so. However, that percentage of people who know that early in their life is small. That's a minority, but there is some tracking there that we see across some studies.
Okay, I mean, this is something that I've also heard a lot from pronatalists. Is it true that people with children are happier on average than people without children?
Oh, this one really gets me going. I've been writing about this probably since I had my Love the Child-Free blog that I started in 2009, because there are these studies that come out that, you know, people with children are happier, people without children are happier. And then over time, there's one way or another, the jury is out. Now, what isn't out is that most of the studies have flaws in the sense that they don't have samples that dissect out a person who's child-free, a person who wanted kids but didn't have them. That might be a different correlation to happiness than a child-free person. So they don't have these different situational samples, and they don't often, hardly ever, operationally define happiness. So if we don't really know what it is, how can we really say that it's so? So one thing that I like to say is, because the jury's out on most of these studies, I can't think of one where I can point to and go, now that one was done well, is that maybe the question isn't so much this about whether kids make you fulfilled and happy. Maybe it's something else. And it's not just whether you have kids or not. I'd like to see more focus on that.
Yeah, we wouldn't necessarily have to have more detailed data and break down the data more to really know what's the main factor at play there, and not simply assume that it's having children or not having children.
Right. And how do you operationally define happiness? And that should be a realm of the research study too, of what's most important that equals, you know, meaning in life for me. That's hard to get to in experimentation. Quantitative data. So I just say that it's one factor. It can be one factor, parenthood, but in the end, it's more complicated than that.
I mean, don't
right?
even get, don't even get me started on happiness studies because they are so flawed. I had a conversation with Dr. Owen Flanagan, a philosopher, because back in 2023 he released an edited book and edited with a few other authors that's titled Against Happiness. And I mean, just to say in a quick sentence that happiness studies are absolutely flawed because they don't even take into account cultural diversity in terms of how people understand happiness in their own cultural context. So
for sure. Yeah, and religious context too, across countries, globally, it's very different. Yeah.
And I mean, one interesting thing is that pronatalists are always talking about these awful regret that supposedly people would feel if they postpone having children and then eventually get to a point in their lives that for some reason they can no longer have them. But they never tell us about another kind of thing that we now know is true thanks to the work of sociologists like the Israeli Orna Donef, that people can also regret having children.
That's right. And it's very taboo, which is why until recently there's not a lot of talk about that. That too points to pronatalism. Why? Because there's the belief in that behemoth set of pronatalist beliefs that we shouldn't feel regret. It should be the best thing that ever happens to us. And so if we don't feel totally 110% positive about it, something's wrong with you. Because that's the way it's supposed to be. So in Orna, she does some great qualitative research to get women to talk more about it. And it has helped more women talk about it online, but they're still, they're like closed forums, the ones that are the most candid, because that taboo is still so powerful, unfortunately. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, let's talk a little bit about biology here. Because, I mean, there might be some misunderstanding going around here in terms of what we have evolved to want. Have we really evolved to want children and to reproduce, or simply to have sex?
Well, one thing that the research tells us, and scholars across that have dug deeply into this, is there is no evidence to support there's anything in our biology that creates the desire, like to want children. There's biology involved in being pregnant at the time of delivery, things happen, but the biology that would create the desire to have them, it's not there. So that too, just think that desire is innate. That is a strong pronatalist belief that we've been fed for centuries. And so long that we just most people think it's true, when really that is not. Now, the urge to have sex, you could say it's more innate because we do have that desire. Yet at the same time, I want to leave that to the experts, because there's people out there who are asexual. They don't have the desire to want sex. So if it were innate, we'd all want to be doing it a lot, So, and it does happen, but so is it innate? That's a whole nother like question on both sides. But what I do know is our biology, our capacities are such that as humans, as Homo sapiens, it's such that our cognitive and brain capacities gives us the choice to have them. Animals, they just do what they do instinctually, and they reproduce to have more, but we have the capacity to go, wait a minute, do I want to do that? So that's where some of our biology comes in my opinion. That's where rubber meets the road.
Yeah, so let me just add a couple of things and then you can comment on them, to the instinct to have sex or the instinct to reproduce. I mean, I would buy more the argument that we have an instinct to have sex. Okay, so at least from puberty onwards, at the very least, we feel attracted a lot to the opposite sex or
Yeah.
the same sex. I mean, whatever. But we have that impulse from a certain point in our lives on to at least feel attracted to someone. And of course, the details about whether we really have an instinct to actually have sex, okay, that's more debatable, because there's a good reason why we also have sex education in schools, because that is not something that people are born with that kind of knowledge either. So I mean, but when it comes to reproducing and having children, I mean, I read a recent study that points to a strong possibility that from very early on in our evolution as Homo sapiens, we learned that sex is connected to reproduction. But that's still a cultural thing. I mean, you still have to teach people that there's that connection. I mean, that connection does not come installed in our sort of evolved software that we are born with that knowledge either. So I mean,
I would agree with you there.
thing.
Yeah, that's why sex education is so important, so that young people know, if you do this, this might happen. And here's how it happens. It's not just the pleasure of the moment. So
yeah, so just to say that even if Homo sapiens have known for, even if it's from the very beginning of our existence, that there's that link between having sex and children, I mean, that's still cultural. It's not biological. It's something that people propagate culturally from generation to generation. That kind of knowledge is not something that a baby is born knowing.
And certainly you could argue too that evolution is still happening, where we have identity, gender identity is evolving, which then leads to what kind of partnering and evolving sexual orientation and the cultural, social lifestyles that are as a result. And that too is, binary or not, asexual or not, romantic. So we're dissecting it out even further as we go along as humans. So, but I think the core of it though is back to, is the desire to want children. That's not innate. That I'm clear about. It's social and culturally been fed to us for centuries, such that we think it is. We think it's hardware wired, but it's really not. It's just old messaging that we think is true. So that's one reason I did the baby matrix, is I want people to see through this, to like, no, this is not true. So once you know what the truth is, it can help people make better decisions about reproduction. So that's largely what I was after.
Okay, so just before we get directly into pronatalism, even though we've already been talking about it throughout our conversation, let me just ask you one more question. I mean, this is something that I've heard in the Birth Gap documentary by Stephen J. Shaw, which is apparently making the rounds again in some podcasts across the internet and elsewhere. I mean, do people who reproduce really tend to want large families? I mean, because one claim that he makes, I'm going to paraphrase, I don't have the exact citation here, the exact quote here, but one claim that he makes is that the hardest step for people to take is to have the first child. And once they have the first child, then they go on to have the second, the fourth, the fifth, and so on. I mean, is there really evidence to support that?
Absolutely not. That's one of just so many assertions that he makes in the film, that the website that a cadre of us have developed called Birth Facts or birthgapfacts.org that we address, that there's no evidence to support that people desire a specific number of children. I mean, we could sit here and argue for a while about why they want fewer, and there's a lot of practicality involved in that. I mean, who can have 5 children? Okay, it's in different cultures. It's culturally, it's based on cultural, social norms that that's related to the number of kids. So it's so not just the way it is. Look around, and that's not what people are doing, and that's not what they really want to do. That's what he might want to see happen, but there's no evidence to support those assertions.
And by the way, we also have to keep in mind that, for example, in poorer countries where the birth rates are still at least higher than they are in most developed countries.
Yes.
One of the reasons why that happens is not necessarily because people plan on having that high number of children. It's because it just happens. I mean, it's just because people do not have access to proper parent planning and sex education and contraception, and they have sex and children happen. I mean, it's not planned.
That's right. Yeah, they have lack of access to birth control or education about that. And, culturally, some of it is using birth control during sex is culturally taboo in some countries. So the women have to face that and how to figure that out. So yes, it's cultural in nature and social driven often as well on just access and education. Yeah.
So we've been talking about pronatalism, but what is pronatalism exactly? And what are the kinds of ideas that they put forth, the pronatalists?
Well, I would say that pronatalism, that word, is a set of beliefs, and it's big. I like to call it a behemoth because it's so big, but it's a set of beliefs that all have in common that they're pro-birth, they encourage reproduction, and they exalt the role of parenthood. So in the baby matrix, I go into 7 big pronatalist assumptions that have driven society for a long time. So there's just they're beliefs. And so I would say that saying the word, like, who is a pronatalist? A pronatalist is somebody who believes all of those beliefs, to the extent that you believe pronatalist beliefs, you're the same, you're a strong pronatalist. Or if you believe some of them, not so strong. So we're throwing the word around pronatalist these days that just because, I might, as a pronatalist, I might think that everybody should have 5 kids. That makes me a pronatalist. Well, that just means I have this one belief that's related to some other beliefs in the behemoth of pronatalism. So, but some of the biggest foundational ones, I think, just 3 that I talk about a lot. One is what I call the pronatalist destiny assumption in the baby matrix, where we're all destined to want to have children. We've discussed that already, and in the book, then I dissect that and say, here's really what the truth is. The second one I call the normality assumption, that somehow if you don't want kids or you don't end up with them, there's something wrong with you. You're not mature enough. I mean, there's a litany of what could be judged about what's wrong, what's not normal. And the third, that a big one, that there's a lot of other beliefs attached to it, that somehow having kids equals true fulfillment in life. Like if you don't do it, you're not going to have what it really means, in life. So there are they all don't have to do with not having kids. It relates to if you have an only child, this is a pronatalist belief. Oh, if you only have one kid, that kid's not going to grow up to be socially, adjusted. That biology or having a biological child is best. Like as a woman, if I don't have my own biological child, then I have to feel shame. Something's wrong with me. If IVF doesn't work, I should feel shame. Something's wrong with me. If I don't have, a boy and a girl, I have to keep going till I have a boy and a girl. And that's what makes a family. I mean, it's just, it affects all of us, this pronatalism set of beliefs that we drag around for centuries, such that I have to point out that it's not just about not having kids or thinking kids are the be all end all. It's all these other things that are attached to people who do have kids and have families. So it's all of us everywhere. It's big. It's long.
Okay, wait a minute. I have to address 2 of the things you said there. So you said that one of the things they say is that you should have more than one child, because if you only have one, they will grow up socially unadjusted.
Yeah,
Where does
that has come from just like, again, because it's a pronatalist belief that you should have a lot of kids. And so if you only have one, there's going to be social messaging around that. Now, for a while, there was research supposedly that supported that. But when it was dissected later by different researchers, they debunked it. And it was by a guy who, Stanley Hall, I think his name was. And he was a guy who came from a large family. And you could tell by reading the research, all of his stereotypes were in there. Was debunked so easily. But by then, it was in the social stratosphere that people believed that. Even to this day, I can't tell you, I hear people, oh yeah, how many kids do you have? Only one. Oh, so are you gonna, is Sally gonna have a sister? Or are you gonna, keep trying? Like, give her a brother or sister. It's so ingrained. So it's, but the research doesn't support that, really, that they're not well adjusted. That boils down to good parenting, but the stereotypes are there. They still are.
And I mean, the other thing is that you say that they sort of shame women who have difficulty reproducing. I mean, why? There are women out there who just are infertile. I mean, right?
And yes, and that points to something is wrong with you and you should feel bad about that. I mean, that's a pronatalist notion. Yeah. That you should feel shame, feel bad that you can't do what a woman's supposed to do, which is to have a child, reproduce. So that too gets at a foundational pronatalist belief that the role of a woman is to become a mother, period, and stop.
Okay, so are we getting now into that sort of silly argument that one of the things that defines a woman is the ability to reproduce? So if you don't have that ability, you're no longer a woman? Is that the argument?
Well, you're still a woman, but you're flawed, and you should feel bad, and you should feel shame about that. And that's also what drives the fertility industry. It's big business. What women will go through to try to have their own kid is amazing. Yeah. But that's, again, it's that social and cultural pressure that with that belief that I'm supposed to be able to do this. And if I can't, meanwhile, women that get pregnant, they miscarry all the time. Our bodies they're smart. When it's not right, the body says, and then that we're supposed to hide that too, that's supposed to be wrong, when really it's really right biologically. So
no, look, I was starting to laugh because it came to my mind that the pronatalists who are religious, and they say that, for example, that God is against abortion, if they looked into the numbers of embryos that get expelled by the woman's body in the first few weeks, the percentages, yes, I guess that they would change their minds about God being against abortion. Because it's just insane. Those numbers are just insane.
You got to be against abortion in the church because, pronatalist dogma is you need more people. We need to have more people having more babies. So I have more people who are in my religious structure so that my religion can keep and grow its power. And that's been going on for centuries. So
yeah, for sure. So let's talk about this idea that pronatalists, or some of them at least, now we're getting into more of the political and I would say mostly political ramifications of pronatalism, because some people take it a step further, and it's not just, I'm going to spend my life advocating for pronatalism. No, I'm going to try to politically impose pronatalism based on certain claims that they make. And one of them has to do with this idea of that we are headed toward population collapse. I mean, what does population collapse mean? And is there any evidence to support that?
The evidence is that there's no collapse going on. I mean, you just got to go to populationclock.org. And I mean, the last I looked at the United States, it's like one net person is born every 14, sometimes it's 16 seconds. I mean, new babies are coming into the world. I mean, every so many seconds. So, and what is it globally? I think the fertility rate for women is like 2.3. Do the numbers. It's going to keep growing. So the population collapse is related to the pronatalist belief that we need to continue to grow the population. And if and a growth-oriented economy is the way we need to exist as humans, why? Because it portends that we need more and more people. It depends on that growth. So to get people scared, they will say, "Oh my God, there's not enough of us. We're gonna become extinct. You gotta get going. You gotta have some kids." It's just another social device, as an early feminist called it. It's like a social device that tries to get us to believe we should be fearful somehow and get us to act in a reproductive way that some power structures would like us to. So I think it's all propaganda. You just look at the numbers and we're growing exponentially. If anything, it's the opposite, where we have Earth overshoot, like we use up the Earth's resources annually sooner and sooner every year because there's more and more of us using more. And there are people who would argue, well, we have to just, lower our consumption. Well, I want to see that. How are we going to figure that out? And even if we found high-tech ways to solve that, what I read and research that I've read is just because the technology gets better on greening up industry, et cetera, and all these things we can do, all that it ends up with is we continue to keep consuming. It doesn't end up in less consumption. It ends up in more consumption. So more consumption, more people. If anything, it's overpopulation crisis, not collapse. So that's my camp. That's my spiel. I'm in the overpopulation. I'm concerned about it camp. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, where's the population collapse if the world population will grow until it reaches 10, 11 billion? Yeah. I mean, and the numbers are not precise, but it's around 10 or 11 billion that people put the cap on, and then it will stabilize. Some people say maybe it will go down a little bit, maybe not.
We don't know.
But
we know what's going to happen. We could have resource wars that could, disseminate populations in different parts of the world. And nobody really knows.
And then the thing is, what number would be enough for these people to be satisfied?
Right.
40 billion, 50 billion, 100 billion, 500 billion. I mean, because after a certain point, we're just completely destroying the planet.
Right? That's right. Yet, pronatalism is all about growth. More people, more this, more, growth-oriented economy. And there are a lot of people that are really concerned about it on how do we unravel that and try to demographically figure out how all of us can live here and how many is that. And there's varying numbers, which I'm sure you're aware of them. I've seen it as low as 2 billion to create a sustainable world economy, that we take enough resources for us, but we don't destroy the planet as we're going. Some say 3, 4. It's not really decided, but one thing for sure is when you think of sustainability as an economy, it's a heck of a lot less than 8 billion and counting. So I'll buy into.
And I mean, then we can also talk about the benefits of having fewer people on the planet that they never address, because, for example, fewer people correlate with higher wages for the average worker.
That's right.
Fewer people correlate with, less housing crisis, for example, as well.
That's right.
And they never address that. Never, ever address that. They're always freaking out about the supposed imminent collapse of Social Security, but they never address those benefits.
That's right. That's what I would say is they're all about the baby matrix. They all, I love the movie, and that's why I called the book that, because they're only telling you what they want you to believe, and it's not the truth. So, you see beyond it. And once you do, you can't really unsee it. So yeah, it's a scary, I think, the too many people and grow at all costs, the way we're going, it's a scary thing for those of us who are already here, and for people who do bring children into the world, and they're going to be here in these next generations to come. And I really don't know what they're going to have to face if we keep on this road.
Yeah, the prospects are already very dire because of climate change and all of that, even with the population we have now. So even adding 2 more or 3 more billion, as we're going to inevitably add to the world population, I mean, So, but I mean, just to address shortly the social security thing. So do aging populations need more babies?
I think the operative word there is need. I don't think we need more babies. I think what we instead need to do more is to try to figure out how to manage the demography, as it were, and that will require getting off, grow at all costs. So again, it's to try to shift the focus to how do we care for everyone who's here. And get off the only idea that's there is to create new people to take care of the old people. That has to be only one way to go. And the rate we're going on it, it's not a good ending. So we need to look at other ways to manage all of us here and the economy. So, and I think there are ways to do it. There are demographers out there and experts that I am sure could figure it out, but we don't have the will. We've got governments that are pronatalist in nature. They are grow at all costs. They want that. So this is another way to approach it that they're not behind yet.
Yeah, and I mean, even in terms of Social Security, another thing yet again that they never talk about is that it's not an inevitability that Social Security will collapse, because productivity can go up. And then fewer people can sustain a growing aging population. So,
and I think there's a lot of discussion too of looking at Social Security, what its original intent was, what is it doing today, how could it be amended, beginning with people that are younger that start paying into it. How do we restructure it so that in the end it takes better care of all of us? It needs to grow itself, because it's been around now for a long time, and it's still operating under the same premises that it was in the beginning, and we're in a different world now. So I hope to see some amendments and things that change for the better over time.
Yeah, I mean, because we have examples all over the world from last century. The US is a very good one, where Franklin Roosevelt basically created Social Security, and the system didn't collapse. I mean, there were a bunch of suddenly new people getting Social Security benefits, and the system didn't collapse. And then after World War II, and I mean, the decades after that, when people from the so-called silent generation retired, I mean, because productivity again kept going up, there were a ton of new people getting Social Security benefits, and the system never collapsed. Of course, there's the caveat that you had the baby boom. There's that caveat, but
you did have more people, and in the beginning, people did not live as long. There's a reason why it said at 65, and now people live a lot longer. So there too, that's another argument for let's look at the reality right now and structure it so it works better for everybody. I think it's more than time.
Yeah, and then there's the other aspect they never talk about, and this is perhaps a way of calling the bluff of some of these pronatalists that get involved in politics, is that they never ever mention the possibility of increasing the tax for rich people, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
They never talk about that.
And there's also people who studied this who are arguing if only we raise the age at which you can start taking Social Security, how that would impact it very positively. I'm no expert about that, but people are, oh my God, But if we started it earlier, made that one change, it might also help the future of the system. But all of this is to say that we have to stop relying on the only theory is we have to create more humans to keep it going.
Yeah.
But it's still dusty old for people to get off of it, because that's just the reality we've lived with for a long generational time.
Okay, so another thing that is sort of related to this idea that we need more babies is that what about immigration? I mean, do these people have something against immigrants?
Well, I would have to say there again, it could be that some people might hold a pronatalist belief that's nationalistic in nature, where we want to make a lot of babies, but we only want a certain kind.
I've actually heard that argument, to be honest.
Yeah, sure.
I've heard the argument that, okay, the argument I've heard from a pronatalist is that, okay, certain kinds of immigrants are fine, but some other immigrants that, conveniently tend to have a browner skin. Those are not fine. So.
Well, even there, is it really a pronatalist, or is it someone who has racial biased views, such that who do they think is normal, right? So there's some intersection there, but because there could be people who hold some strong pronatalist beliefs who are fine with immigrants coming into the country, right? And hey, have babies here, we need more workers and to do X, Y, and Z. So it's not so clear cut that, it's pronatalist is an anti-immigrant. It's more nuanced. But if there is an anti-immigrant stance, Roosevelt, he did it policy-wise years ago. What was it like? I forget, like in the early 1900s, he was afraid that the whites were going to be outnumbered, so he was kind of a eugenist, and he didn't want immigrants here. So it's not like it's a new way of thinking. However, generations ago, in the times of the Romans or Augustus, I would maybe theorize it would have been less so, because you had civilizations and they were all trying to fight to be the dominant situation. They weren't going like, hey, you can't come over here. They were busy building their own civilization. But today, there's a lot more factors involved. And like I say, there's a lot of people who hold pronatalist views who they want the immigrants to be here. No. But then there are those who, they want a lot of babies. The new tech bro pronatalists, they make it sound like this is like a new thing, like the pronatalists are new, given this wanting to have IVF screening to make the perfect white babies and all that. The only difference is we have better technology today. So to me, it comes around in waves, where this anti-immigrant thing coupled with pronatalism, it's yes, it's partly propaganda, but it's just something that comes to, we got to put the spotlight on it now, and wait, a year from now, it'll be something else, Ricardo. So we'll be.
Yeah, just to be clear, the kind of argument I was making is not that there's necessarily a link between being pronatalist and being an anti-immigrant. That link is not always there, but for some people, and for some very prominent people, it is.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I would argue, attaching to that what we're not saying is that there is a racial bias. There's racism involved there. And whether you want to say that's, pronatalist in nature, there too, it's two separate things, but they can coexist, unfortunately. Yeah.
As well as some other eugenicist takes. Like, for example,
Yes.
I've heard some pro-natalist people, very prominent ones, even people who have pro-natalist movements and institutions, associations, and stuff like that, talking openly about things like IQ, having kids with higher IQ, and
Yep.
selecting against certain kinds of psychological traits, or
Yep.
in favor of certain kinds of psychological traits, and other kinds of diseases and things like that. Right.
Yep, I see it too. Yeah, there's definitely more talk about it because the technology is, it's more there to maybe be used, but that's also an ethical discussion too, of how much do you want to use it, and to design babies, how much do we want to get into that? So there'll be different camps on that one too, for sure, pro-natalist and not.
Yeah. So I have one last question / topic I would like to ask you about. So do you think that pronatalism represents or can represent a threat to women's reproductive rights?
I think so. I think we've seen it through different generations. Certainly beliefs that back to the belief that, mother, a woman's role is as mother drives other beliefs and policies, from birth control access to making it harder, to positions on abortion. That's you study that over time, and it's a moving target. It was not illegal in times past, but now we're back to where we're fighting about whether it's the baby, it's a human from the moment of conception. So these core beliefs that a woman's here to be a mother, these little tentacles come out to these other beliefs that then have policy ramifications depending on where you are and who's leading the government and what they believe. So I think the answer is yes, and it goes in cycles, but it's very much related.
I mean, particularly when it comes to abortion, and even going beyond abortion, because, for example, now in the US, there are talks to limiting the access to anti-conceptional medicine to women. I mean,
it's nuts.
Like the pill and so on. I mean, basic things.
That's a lack of access to birth control. That's what's the main point of it, is they want to make it more difficult to get access to birth control, get access to a way to abort the child without any hospital being necessary. They wanted to make it hard to even go anywhere to get an abortion. So yes, I think it points directly back to what the leaders think about why women are here. The
anti-abortion, I don't like to call them pro-life, because I think that's just propaganda.
I agree with you.
The anti-abortion people, there are so much silly arguments that they make, because they ignore, sometimes they don't know about it, other times they just straight out lie about, for example, anti-abortion laws reducing the number of abortions. That's not true. Countries where abortion is legal actually see the number of abortions go down. So it's the opposite.
Correct.
And then they assume that just because they ban abortion, women, if they really want, are not going to take steps to do the abortion anyways, but in much less safe circumstances.
Exactly.
They still have the abortion. It's just it's not in a safe environment, in a hospital, in a clinic, or something like that. Right.
That's right. Yeah. That's very right on. I agree with you. So.
Yeah.
I think the good news there too is more of us now see through some of this propaganda. And yes, there are people who believe it and also hold religious positions that help support believing some of these things you're talking about. But I do think that the younger generations, they see through some of this stuff, and they know what is true and what isn't. So they're not as easily fooled by some of this messaging that's just, ridiculous.
I mean, let me just let me just say, and this might sound a bit cynical, but I laughed a bit when in early 2025, I think it was in January, news came out in The Guardian that once abortion got banned across different states in the US, the rate of young people, both men and women, wanting to have vasectomies.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and women went up to, they wanted to get their tubes tied or some kind of permanent birth control. So it was exactly the opposite effect that was wanted. So I saw that too.
So maybe you're so pro-natalist that you're actually contributing to people being permanently child-free.
Yeah, so the beliefs really, they do, if they're held by people in power, we've seen it in history, and we see it now, that policy that can be made to make it harder for women to have control over their reproductive lives, policies that incentivize having kids. You get tax breaks the more kids you have. See, if it were me and I were in power, I'd do just the opposite. I would incentivize people to take like a parenting course before they ever get pregnant, so they can help them decide whether they want to be in the first place, and if they do, what they need to learn to be good parents. And then and only then would they get the incentivized, piece of it.
I mean, this is one of the reasons why I don't call them pro-life. And I say that's just propaganda, because once the child is out of the womb, they don't care about it at all. I mean, where are they being for maternity leave, paternity leave? And why are people who are Republicans in the US, for example, voting against free lunches in school for children? They don't care about children at all. And where are they proposing stronger laws against child labor in the US, because it's gone up in recent years? They're not. They're not doing that.
And we have a society where a woman who doesn't want the child can just drop it off at a fire department house, a firehouse. Women can leave the hospital without the baby and not get any repercussions, the mother or the father. So we allow people to have kids, and then when the baby's here, so often we don't do right for them. They end up in foster care. It's harder to get adopted. The adoption system is very difficult. So lots of negative impacts as a result of these pro-natalist beliefs that we should be able to have as many kids as we want when we want. We pay a lot of costs for that. So, and one huge one is we have a lot of parents who aren't ready to be parents. The kids are the ones that suffer.
Yeah,
so that really gets me going too.
And that's the thing, because as we talked about at the beginning, since most child-free people are not trying to impose their beliefs on other people, contrary to pro-natalist people, I mean, child-free people are perfectly okay if someone wants to have 10 children. I mean, if you want to have 10 children, go ahead and have 10 kids, whatever, do wherever you want, right? And child-free people are probably even more in favor of those kinds of policies like maternity leave, paternity leave, free lunches in school, whatever, to really take care of children who are actually born into this world.
Right? Yeah, despite the stereotype, people who don't raise children of their own really do care about the kids who are already here. And many, from my interviews back to the late 90s, many are in occupations that help families, help kids, whether it be schools or a whole number of things. They have kids in their lives professionally, personally. We're aunties, we're godmothers. We find our way to participate in the development of the next generation if we want. And, honestly, from what I see, thousands over 25 years, most people who aren't raising kids of their own, they do participate in children's lives in some way, some form. We care about, how they live in our society. So.
Yeah, so Laura, look, we've already done an hour, and I think we've covered the most important aspects of being child-free and pronatal here. So, I mean, there were other things that we could probably talk about, but let's leave it there. And where can people find you and your work on the internet?
Well, I have a website, lauracarroll.com, and I'm on just about all the socials, on Facebook and Instagram. I post mostly on Blue Sky these days. I'm not as active on X anymore for reasons we all maybe know about, but on all
reasons probably also tied to a certain specific person, also
the person who is a pronatalist.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you go to my website, you have links to all those socials as well as information about my books. And also on my site, there's a child-free writings library, I call it now, but it really is it's all of my writings from when I had a pretty popular blog, La Vie Child-Free, that I started in 2009. And then over the years, I just put everything onto lauracarroll.com. So I continue to feed that library, but you'll find writings going back about topics we talked about today. Certainly, I have a whole set of them on okay, let's talk about the happiness studies and what's wrong with them, So you'll see some historical conversations that have been out there about the child-free people and a lot of things that are related to that, and pronatalism as well.
Okay, so look, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. It's been very fun to talk with you.
Yeah, you too, Ricardo. I enjoyed it a lot. Thanks a bunch.
Hi guys, thank you for watching this interview until the end. If you liked it, please share it, leave a like and hit the subscription button. This show is brought to you by Enlights, learning and development done differently. Check their website at enlights.com, and also please consider supporting the show on Patreon or PayPal. I would also like to give a huge thank you to my main patrons and PayPal supporters: Per Larsen, Jerry Muller, Frederick Sunda, Bernardo Seixas, Olaf Alex, Adam Kessel, Matthew Whittingburg, Arno Wolf, Tim Hollis, Eric Alenia, John Connors, Philip Forrest Connolly, Dan Demetri, Robert Windiger, Rui Inácio, Zup, Mark Neves, Colin Holbrook, Phil Kavanagh, Mikkel Stormir, Samuel André, Francis Fortiago Nunes, Fergal Cossen, Hal Herzog, Nuno Machado, Jonathan Labyrinth, João Linhares, Stantantia, Samuel Correia, Eric Hines, Mark Smith, João Eira, Tom Hummel, Sardus France, David Sloan Wilson, Yacila Dez Araújo, Romain Roach, Diego Londonho Correia, Yannick Punter, Dana Rusmani, Charlotte Bliss, Nicole Barbaro, Adam Hunt, Pavlo Stasevski, Nelek Bach, Guy Madison, Gary G. Allman, Sam Afzal, Adrian Yeager, Paul Tolentino, João Barbosa, Julian Price, Edward Hall, Edin Bronner, Douglas Fry, Franca Bortolotti, Gabriel Ponce Cortez, Ursula Litsky, Scott, Zachary Fish, Tim Duffy, Sonny Smith, John Wiseman, Daniel Friedman, William Buckner, Paul George Arnaud, Luke Loaki, Georgios Theophanos, Chris Williamson, Peter Wolozin, David Williams, Diogo Costa, Anton Erickson, Charles Murray, Alex Shaw, Maury Martinez, Coralie Chevalier, Bangalore Atheists, Larry D. Lee Jr., Old Erringbon, Sterry, Michael Bailey, Dan Sperber, Robert Grassi, Zigoren, Jeff McMahon, Jake Zool, Barnabas Radix, Mark Campbell, Thomas Dovner, Luke Nissen, Chris Story, Kimberly Johnson, Benjamin Galbert, Jessica Nowicki, Linda Brandon, Nicholas Carlson, Ismail Benzliman, George Coriatis, Valentin Steinman, Per Crowley, Kate Van Goller, Alexander Hubbard, Liam Dunaway, BR, Masood Ali Mohammadi, Perpendicular, Jonas Hertner, Ursula Goodenough, Gregory Hastings, David Pinsoff, Sean Nelson, Mike Lavigne, and Dios Necht. A special thanks to my producers, Isar Webb, Jim Frank, Lucas Stafiniak, Tom Vanagdam, Bernard Ugni, Curtis Dixon, Benedict Mueller, Thomas Trumbull, Catherine and Patrick Tobin, Giancarlo Montenegro, Alni Ortiz, and Nick Golden, and to my executive producers, Matthew Lavender, Sergio Quadrian, Bogdan Kanivets, and Rosie. Thank you for all.